There are almost no countries left in the world without debt. Even the so-called superpower, the United States, is now burdened with over $38 trillion in interest-bearing debt, the highest in history. The European Union owes $14 trillion, Japan $9 trillion, even oil-rich Saudi Arabia, industrial giant Germany, and powerhouse China carry enormous debts. But here's the real question. If everyone owes money, then who is it owed to? That's where history steps in. Because debt isn't just a burden, it's one of the very foundations of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every rise and fall has been built upon this invisible debt ground. And if you look closely enough, you'll notice something interesting. The world is actually indebted to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone shares the burden equally. Today, global interest-bearing debt has surpassed $315 trillion, almost 3 times the size of the world economy. So how did we end up here? This story begins centuries ago, with a war. In 1694, while England was at war with France, its gold reserves were nearly depleted. The king turned to the merchants for help. "Give me money now, and I'll repay you later through taxes," he said. In other words, he borrowed against the future income of the state, saving the day for now. To manage this new system, the Bank of England was created. From that moment, the state could spend money it didn't yet have, and the creditors received something priceless in return: the supposedly unshakable promise of the government. This promise was called a bond, a piece of paper representing state debt. And that's where the heart of modern finance began to beat. France copied the model, the Dutch refined it, and America adopted it. Empires that once fought for gold began issuing bonds for interest. The battlefield had changed. It was no longer about weapons, but about balance sheets. Today, debt itself has become the world's largest export, or perhaps its most carefully engineered one. Every nation is in debt, every bank can easily lend with interest, and every citizen is both a debtor and a creditor. But the real question remains: who holds the end of the chain? Let's start with the United States. Of America's $38 trillion debt, more than half is owed to its own citizens, to banks, pension funds, and insurance companies, while foreign investors hold about $9 trillion. Countries like Japan, China, the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium own only a small portion. The majority is held by Americans themselves. The government issues bonds, banks buy those bonds, and when necessary, the Federal Reserve buys them back. That's how new dollars are created. Citizens pay taxes, interest income flows into retirement accounts, and the cycle continues, self-sustaining. This isn't just an American phenomenon, it's global. Japan lends to the US. The US funnels that money through the IMF to Europe. Europe lends it to developing nations, and those nations reinvest their reserves into Western bonds. In short, a global chain of debt. Everyone owes someone, and no one wants to leave the table. Markets, giant funds, central banks, hedge funds, and pension institutions are the invisible architects of this debt system. They decide who borrows cheaply and who pays dearly. Lose their confidence, and your currency collapses, your government can fall. That's how dangerous a debt-based system can be. Central banks don't just manage debt. They also create money with every bond purchase, acting as the high priests of this global structure. Every dollar in circulation represents a debt. There is no such thing as debt-free money. But what happens if trust collapses? Then the entire mechanism stops. We've seen it happen in Greece, Argentina, and Sri Lanka. Rescue packages came, but the price was steep. Higher taxes, soaring unemployment, and deep austerity. Because here lies the secret of the debt-based system. Debt isn't meant to be repaid. It's meant to be sustained. Governments never truly pay off their debts. They roll them over, refinance, and restructure. Interest is simply the rent of debt, and the world is now addicted to it. Even the United States never intends to pay off its debt completely. U.S. Treasury bonds are considered the world's safest asset, the backbone of pensions, banks, and central reserves. Paying off that debt would collapse the very system built upon it. So the goal isn't to pay, it's to maintain confidence. Because when trust disappears, numbers lose all meaning. And that's the real secret of global debt. The plan was never to end debt, but to make the world believe it will always be repaid someday. Yet, this trust is not distributed equally. The debtor and the beneficiary are not the same person. Interest payments flow from workers to capital owners, a transfer of wealth not just between nations, but between classes. And that's why inequality keeps growing, because the system rewards those who hold the debt, while it burdens those who must pay it. In the end, debtor and creditor are two sides of the same engine. The problem begins when that engine runs out of fuel. Trust. When trust breaks, the illusion fades, and we're reminded of a simple truth. Interest-bearing debt is a promise that enriches the few, enslaves the many, and can never be carried forever. If this lit a light in your mind, subscribe. History holds the answers that make things easier. I'll show you.